Hello, my name is Ron Bulard, and I'm the President and CEO of Park Dental Research, and we'd like to demonstrate for you the software JUELL 3D OC. And with me is
Niko Sweetland. I am the JUELL 3D Product General Manager.
So we're going to start off by opening the JUELL 3D software. Within the directory of the JUELL 3D software, there are two programs. One is the JUELL 3D OC workstation, and the other is the JUELL 3D OC main software. The main software is connected to the printer. If you're printing a job and you want to be able to go back and set up additional models and be preparing for the next print, you can start another version of the JUELL OC software while it's printing. So that's helpful in being able to get the next build ready while one is being printed. So we're going to start off, we're going to double click on the JUELL 3D OC software. And the splash screen comes up telling you that you're in version 10. The first thing that happens whenever one is installed, we assign a printer name for your printer. There's a serial number that comes off the printer, and then we put down the distributor and we click OK. Let's go through the software, and we're going to talk about a lot of the features that are in the software just briefly, and then we'll come back and we'll go into detail on all the features. We're going to start off with the upper left-hand corner. In this we have preferences, and under preferences in this area we talk about how whenever you bring a model into the build plate or onto the build plate, how they're arranged and where they're located on the build plate. You can adjust that by clicking one of these boxes. The top one auto centers a loaded single model on the build plate. So basically it brings it to the center of the build plate. The next one auto arranges multiple loaded models on the build plate. So if you bring in multiple models, as you bring them in at one time, it automatically places them. And this bottom one relocates the lowest part to the build plate. So when you bring it in, it automatically puts it on the build plate. You can play with those settings, either turning them on or off. The advanced, rarely will you go into this area, but if for some reason you're having difficulty building, you want to check and make sure that the foreground color is always set to white. So this is this bottom right color. Sometimes that can get changed, and if it does, it certainly affects the build quality. And the background color needs to be set to black. This is a debugging. Sometimes we'll have you turn one of these on if you're having a problem with your computer, but for right now, just leave the one check that says log driver debugging to common log. That way if we have a problem, we can go back and see what the problem is with the printer. Also under File, we have the Exit button, which allows you to exit and close the program. The next button is a Help button. In the Help button, we have Clear Undo Records is the top one. What you'll notice is on the right side, there's a gauge, and this gauge tells you how much of the memory is being used on the build plate. But as you do things, as you move and as you build supports and as you rotate and flip objects, each one of those moves is recorded. And so this back button allows you to take it back. I'll demonstrate in detail what that does, but this Clear Undo Records allows you to free up memory. So let's say you've brought in 3 models, you've flipped them, you've rotated them, you've got them now in a position you want to build supports, you move them, and the memory is starting to creep up here because it remembers each scene. Once you get to the point that you're ready to print, you can go in and clear the undo records, and that will free up a lot of memory that will make the printer print faster and more efficiently. The next one is a user's manual. Under this, you can click on this one and it will bring up our user's manual to help you. The third one down are support videos. We've got several videos on the web that it can bring up. And this one allows you to import settings. For example, let's say you have an older version of software and you've now updated to a new version of software. You'll notice over here, we're on version 10.0.12.14. And let's say it's a new version that we've just installed, and we want to update from an older version, which we're going to say from version 10.11. So this is going to select all of my settings. So I've got a lot of things that maybe over time I've built up support settings, I've built up things, and I want to bring those into this new version. You would click this button, and that basically what that does is it imports the settings from an older version. And that's pretty much everything that's included in the help. Under tub size, we offer 3 different depths of tubs, a small, a medium, and large. That's kind of important because when you're building, you want to know how high you can build in your tub. So depending upon which tub you're using, you should select the proper tub size for that tub. And that's done with this block here. Under JUELL 3D, there's an administrative mode, and the administrative mode is used for us to make corrections or to modify your printer specifications. Typically, that's something that you would call in to Niko or call into the technical support group. We would log in with you and make any changes. We also have another button which is called Show Advanced Controls. If you click that button, it adds additional buttons across the top of the screen. I'll go ahead and click that so you can see. It adds the control button, the configure button to the top of the screen. And these are buttons that typically, once your printer is set up, you don't mess with those. That's why they are shown under Show Advanced Controls. This is resin data, register resin, and read projector mask. Resin data is the amount of resin that you have in your printer. It's very important when you get your resin. Each bottle of resin has an RFID tag on the bottle of resin, and that RFID tag contains specific information about the resin that you're printing with, such as the cure times. It contains the date in which the resin was fabricated. It registers the resin into your printer, and it tells you how much resin you have, how much you have remaining, and it gives you a total amount of resin that you've consumed so far. There's also a button here that allows you to register your resin. If you're using one of the printers that has an auto mixer on it, there's also some buttons here that show up that allow you to turn your mixer on within your resin that will mix the resin in the tub. Okay, so that's these buttons across the top. The last one actually shows you your build plate size. It says that the build plate is 192 by 108. Now you'll notice that that number will change a few millimeters depending upon the calibration for the resin. So that number may not always be 192 by 108, and it's going to depend upon what resin you're using to build with. Let's go down to the next row. So the next row we have the JUELL 3D logo. It's located here. We also have this button which allows you to open up different types of files to bring onto the build plate. Here we have all these different types of files that can be brought in. We also allow you to save a file called a J3D file. That is a specific file for the JUELL 3D printer that allows you to lay out, save that layout, and the STL files are saved independently on the build plate. They're not saved as one unless you save them as one. You can merge them into one. So under this, we have STL files that you can bring onto the build plate, such as we have a calibration disk. And what happens is our software, before it loads an image, it actually does check to make sure that the object is patched, so that it's watertight. In previous versions of JUELL 3D, it would bring in models, but it would not check them first to see if they'd been patched. The reason it took just a second was this object, it was patching any holes that were contained in the object. That feature can be turned off, and it will speed up the loading of objects onto the build plate, but we recommend that you check each object through the automatic process of checking it for water tightness and for holes when you bring it on. So now the object is on the build plate, and that's basically what this does. Anytime I click on an object, I can bring in, let's say I want to bring in a model. So it just checked this model to see if it was watertight. I have several different things that I can do with this model that are all of these buttons over here, and we'll go over that in just a minute, but let's continue going down this line. This next button is a button that allows us to save whatever's on the build plate. So if I click this button, I can save it as an STL file. If I save it as an STL file, it's going to save everything on the build plate as one object and allow me to bring it back in as one object. That's a nice feature because maybe we bring something on and we get everything set up the way we want it, and we want to remember that. For example, let's say we have rotated, and this is how we want these objects to be remembered. Now you'll notice there's two objects on the build plate. If I hit save, and I'm going to give this a name, we're going to call it model test, save. I'm going to skip over here. I'm going to show you quickly. I can delete what's on the build plate. Now I can come back in and I go to open, and I'm going to bring in an STL file, and I'm looking for model test right there. So you'll notice it brought both models back in on the build plate. But they're now, since I saved them as an STL, they're now one model. Okay? So now we have both models on the build plate. This next button is a connect to printer button. You click this button. I'm just doing this off my laptop computer. We're not on a printer computer. It would connect up and you'd see a connected button. So that's the buttons across the second row. On the third row, we have 3D layout, which is the mode that we're in now. We also have the print button. And the print button allows us to basically do everything that we need to do once we have everything laid out on the build plate the way we want it laid out. This third button is our resin button. These lights over here, these are telling us that the light engine is turned on, that the motor controller is turned on, but it's not connected up because I don't have it plugged into this computer. All of these lights should be green if everything is working properly. If one is not green, then there's an indication that it's either not plugged in, or if you get a red light, that means that it's not working. We also have a performance gauge, and over here is your performance gauge that shows you how much of your memory has been used up. Now, so if I move this to here, and then I rotate this, and then I move it over here, each one of those steps took up some memory. So I can go back and I can go back. I can go all the way back to nothing. Each of those steps requires a certain amount of memory. If you'll recall, if you go up to help and you click on clear undo records, what that does is once you get to the point that you're ready to print or that you find you've used up too much memory, you can clear that memory and you can continue to work with the software. It just won't remember anything that you've done up until that point. So let's go ahead and we're going to bring back in a stone model. Here's our stone model on the build plate. And what we would like to do now is go down this list of things that we can do in the layout process. So we currently have one model on the build plate. There are ways of moving that model, and we have a gyro system that allows us to move it. So if you'll notice, we have different colored arrows. We've got a red, a blue, and a green arrow. And they correspond over here to this icon over here that shows the X, the Y, and the Z. So if I want to move this in the X direction, I would grab the red arrow. It turns to yellow, and it allows me to move the model in the X direction. If I want to move in the Z direction, I would grab the blue arrow, and it allows me to move it up and down. And likewise, if I want to move in the Y direction. Now, I also have the ability to rotate. And if I want to rotate around the Y-axis, if I want to go around the Y-axis, I would grab the green. And we can rotate it left and right. And up above, you can see that there is a, right below the resin, right up here, you'll notice that there is a degrees that tells me how much I have moved the model one direction or another. So a lot of the movement and a lot of the everything that you want to do in placement of your object can be done here, or it can also be done under your preferences that tells you that you want to auto center or you want to auto arrange or relocate to the lowest part. This is only when you're bringing a model onto the build plate. Okay? So once we have a model on the build plate, let's say we wanted to create 2 of them. Well, we could click the plus button one time, and basically what they did was it created another model. So now we have a model kind of superimposed on a model, and we can move it over. We could create another model, create another one, and just simply keep creating models. We could also say, well, you know what? We want to have 5 more models. We'd put in the number 5 and we'd just say okay, and then the software just goes through and creates 5 more models. Now, we can also pick one of the models. Let's say we want to double click on one of the models, and we can say, well, take that one out. I don't want that one. So it will remove the one model. The other thing that we can do is we can select, so if I double click on one model, I'm going to double click on one of them, and the way I can do that is I can either click on the actual model itself, or I can come over here to this list and I can pick a model out of this list that I want. And then I can come in, so the gyro is only going to affect that one model. So I pick this and I can rotate that one model out of them all. Or I can move that one model out of it all. Now let's say I wanted to put that model back. I'd come over here and click the back arrow, and it put it back where it was. Another feature that we have is it's select the entire scene. So if I click this button, what it's done now is it's selected all the models. When I go to rotate the one model, it makes them all rotate, or it moves them all together. So now I move this over here. It's going to go ahead and move all the models to the position that I put that one model. Okay? So once you select the entire scene, the way you deselect the entire scene is you go click on one of the models. You can also select entire scene, and if you hit remove, you're going to remove them all. The other way to remove them all would be to select one of the models, okay, and you could either remove that one, or you could remove all of them by hitting the X. So that's how the scene, basically the scene works. We have some other features to the scene. Let me bring a stone model back on. So here we have the model. What I'm doing is with my left mouse button, with my mouse, if I press the left mouse button, I can rotate the image around. If I press the right mouse button, it allows me to move the whole build area around. If I take the wheel and I scroll it, I can scroll the image in and out to get a better view of the image. In addition, I have some presets over here. So I can see a home position, which is a straight on view, or I can look at a view from above, straight down on the object.
Okay, Dr. Bulard, if you were to right-click on the top view of the preset,
okay,
or the home, you can actually view from the front. You can also view from the back, and then again on the right or left side, as well as the top or bottom. Just to get you every angle of what you're looking at without having to physically rotate.
So these boxes allow you to see any view that you want to of the object by simply right-clicking on the object. It's a pretty nice feature. You can also zoom in and out, see that. So then the next box, and anytime you click on a box, it opens that box. So let's go to the object information box. In this, what it's telling us is what is the volume of this model that's on the build plate. It says it's 39.2 cc's. CC is basically an ml, a milliliter. And it's going to tell me what the cost is to print that. Now the cost is based upon what you put in as your cost per resin. This is the number of points or cloud points that the object has. This is the number of polys that are inside the object. This is the memory size of the object, and this is the size of a cube that goes around the object. Now let's say, for example, that you had multiple objects. So I'm going to go ahead and put 3 objects on the build plate, and we're going to separate these 3 objects. And we're going to go back to object information. It's going to say, well, the one that I've selected is 39.2, but let's say that I want to select all of them. So now what it's doing is, it's by clicking this box, it takes all the objects on the build plate and it tells me the information about all of them. Okay, the next thing that we're going to look at is the move feature. And under the move feature, we have the ability to turn our gyro on and off. So I'm going to turn it on and off with this feature. Now you'll notice that I can come over to this object and I can say, well, I want to rotate this object. Okay, but it only moved the one object. I'm going to put it back. The other thing is, let's say that I have an object and I want to put it on the build plate. So I'm going to move the object out of position. I'm going to click on this button, and what it's going to do is it's going to take it and put it right on the build plate. This is going to center it on the build plate. So it puts the very center of rotation and everything right on the build plate. Now, these next objects, maybe it'd be better if I get something that's a little more either horseshoe shaped, but I want to demonstrate auto nesting that we have for the build plate. So let me clear this, and I'm going to bring some other objects onto our build plate. Let me go down to... I'm just looking for some STL files to, yeah, here we go. Okay, I'm bringing this object on the build plate, and I'm going to rotate this object to the left. I'm going to take it 90 degrees to the left. Okay, just a tiny bit more. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create, let's create about 15 of these. Now I could sit here and manually place these in each, come back, pick another one, and put each one on the build plate in the spot that I want it. Or I could go to the move button and say auto place. And what it does is it just puts all the objects on the build plate in a certain position. But now let's talk, and this first button just places them in a position just so that they're spaced out. And it uses these parameters that are set over here on the right side for setting them. Let's go back and let's increase the number. I'm gonna give the object a slightly different shape by rotating it. And let's put another 20 objects on the build plate. And now we're going to go in and we're going to say the same thing. We want to place them. So this is how it's decided that they should all be placed. Let's go in and put give another position for the models. And now let's put another 20 on the build plate. And we go to move. And as you can see, the problem is it doesn't know where to put them all, so they all stay on the build plate. So we have this nesting ability that will nest the objects together. We're going to click on this button, and under nesting we have 2 types of nesting. First, we're going to do a standard nesting, and it says the minimum distance between each part is 5.2 millimeters. So we're start nesting, and it's going to nest all these parts. So what it's done now, you'll notice, is that it nested them and it put them all on the build plate so that they were all placed on the build plate. We also have the ability to, let's make that a little bit more, a little higher definition of nesting, and let's see where that places them. Takes a little longer. So now you can see that it did change the positioning and it packed them in just a little bit tighter. For this particular nesting, we're going to need the medium-sized tub in order to print all these, but you can see all the objects laid out on the build plate. Now, we can also do what's called 3D nesting, and 3D nesting even packs them in even tighter. We'll go ahead and start this. And this is going to take a few minutes for it to nest every object. So now what you notice is when I use the move button that is 3D pack, it packs them in and it puts them all in a position that it makes all of them easier to pack. Let's go back to this one. Let's look at these. These are the minimum part spacing, the auto layout, and the auto layout in the Y. So those nesting features are features that allow you to place parts on the build plate and automatically position them. So let me go back and we'll bring in another part. Let's bring in the
Do you have the trade show model? That would be a good one.
okay. Here's our step. We've brought it in. And what we want to do now is we're going to look at the move features that allow us to move incrementally. So I can move this in the X direction, a -1, or I can move it a +1. Let's get this to where it's the correct. So if I move it a +1, and let me increase this number so it's 5, so you can see. So it shows you a shadow of the object as to where it's going to move when you make this correction. So you can see that it would move the object. It says it's going to move to there, so I click yes, that's where I want it. It takes it there. If I want it to go there, I click it, it automatically does it. If I want to go in the z-axis, let's say I want to go +5.1, it'd take it up. If I want to go negative, it would go there. So that's basically the move features of the software. Also, in our scale features, we have the ability to scale the object. So right now it's at 100% scaling. Let's say we wanted to make this object 110% of the size. We'd change that to 110, and we would click this button and you can see how much it's increasing the size. Let's make it a little bit more so it demonstrates. So if I were going to make it 200%, that's how big the object would be. I can click that. Obviously, we can come back and hit go back, and it'll take it right back to where it was. This will only increase the X size. So let's say that so you can see that's how much it would increase in the X. This is how much it would increase in the Y. And in the Z, if we wanted to shrink the part, let's say we'd make it 50% of the size. And basically that's going to make the part smaller in height, which is what it did. Also in the scale, we have the ability to turn the gyro on and off. In scale, we also have a third button that we can add that allows you to drag the size of the object. So you notice that we have these little boxes that formed. We've got a red, a green, and a blue box. And we also have this purple box. So we'll start off with the red. The red just increases the X. The blue increases the Z. And the green increases the Y. And the purple increases all of them. So it makes them all uniformly grow. Typically, by default, that's left off because most of the time when you're working with dental and medical models, you don't want to scale any of the sizes or change anything. In the next button, we have our rotate features. And in rotate, we are able to rotate not only with the gyro, but we're also able to rotate by way of the X, the Y, and the Z, and we can determine exactly down to the 1/10 of a degree. So I can say I want to rotate that 33.1 degrees. Okay, so that would have rotated that exactly 33.1 degrees. Okay, we have the ability to mirror. So if we click this button, and let's say we just want to mirror the object, we click on this and it will mirror the X, or mirror the Y, or mirror the Z. So whatever we do to the object, if we want to go back, we can always click and take it back to positions. Okay? So now, the next tool is the editing tool. And under editing tools, these are tools that allow us to add to or shape or take away. So for example, we have this object on the build plate, and let me rotate it. And the idea is I want to move this to the build plate. So now it's sitting on top of the build plate. If I want to edit this object, I've got either a box, a sphere, a cone, or a cylinder. And with these shapes, I can make any tool that I want. For example, I bring in this object. Now I can drag this out on my build plate. This is my sculpting tool, and I can make it whatever shape I want to make this. So let's say this is the object that I'm wanting to use as a cutting tool. I can bring it over and I superimpose it onto the other object. I hit the control button and double click on the other object, and it turns it to a kind of a brownish color, yellow brown. And then what I do is I come down here and I notice I've got either merge. I can merge this model. So let's hit merge first. So now what's happened is that's become one model. Let's go back one, and I'm going to bring the object back on. And this time, I'm going to hit the control button and double click on the other object. I'm going to say I want to remove that from the object. And now what I've done is I've actually cut a piece out of the object. So these tools become significant tools in that they allow you to now edit an object that you've got on the build plate or clean that object up. So now I've cut a hole into that object. So with my tools, I can pretty much design and modify any object that's on the build plate. Another feature is the text, adding text to objects. So I can select the font that I want to use for this. So let's say I'm going to use Broadway font, and I want it to be a size of 4, and I want it to be a 1/2 millimeter thick, and the label is, I'm going to call this Dr. Brown, okay? And this is the label that will be placed on all of these. And I've got Dr. Brown, he's got 10, or let's say he's got 5 models. So I'm going to say 1 through 5. And if I wanted to, I could also put a date, and I could say I want it to have today's date on the model. I would hit create, and what it's doing now is it is creating labels that I'm able to either append onto this model. So I'm going to select one of them, bring it over, rotate it, and I can either have that impress into the model, or I can make it cut into the model, and I attach it to the model the same way. I just hit the control button and say either cut away from, and basically what that just did was it put, if you can see down here at the bottom, it put the information that I just text into the model. So that's what the text button does. Okay, so another way that you can attach the labels to the model is I can select a label. I can say, okay, I want it to go on a flat surface of the model, so I'm going to rotate these. And then I come over here with my shift button and I right click on the model twice, and it automatically takes it to wherever I am pointing on the model. So I just took this lettering over and I put it over on the model by right clicking it, by right clicking the model. So you select the label that you want, double click, you go to your model and you select the area on the model that you want to place this. So I'm going to rotate my model and I'm going to double click, and what it did was it just brought it over and it automatically puts it on the model in that spot. So another feature that we have is the ability to bring in logos. So for example, we double click this, we're going to load a logo, and I don't think I've got any logos on this, so I'm going to show you how to make a logo. You double click where it says use this website, and what you do is you click on this and you basically upload a picture. So any JPEG or TIFF, it could be your signature, it could be the logo of your dental practice. You say upload a picture, and then you download an SVG file. So it takes this picture, converts it to an SVG file. So I would now click download, and it's going to download this, and I would say save picture as, and I'm going to save it as an SVG, so I'm going to save it in my pictures, save. So now I close, and I go back and I say load logo. So I'm going to need to go to my pictures, and I'm going to bring in this bike SVG, and I say create. So now what it's doing is it's thinking it's creating an SVG file. And it actually brought in, I had it set to bring in 5. So you can see this little bike down here. Now what we want to do is we want to resize that. So I'm going to go to scale. And I would like to increase the size of this. And as you can see, what I've done is I've made basically a logo or a rubber stamp. But out of a 2D, just even, I mean, you take a photograph or you take an image of your logo practice, now you can make a stamp and you save that, and every time in every model you can attach the logo of your dental lab or your dental practice in the bottom of every model automatically through this feature in the software, which is called Add a Logo. In addition, on the bill plates, we have this button which is called Patch Model. Now, we automatically patch our models when we bring them onto the bill plate. This patch model will take whatever model that you're looking at, and it automatically patches for any holes in the model. Another significant thing is that many models, depending upon how they were scanned and sent to you at the lab, sometimes they can be overscanned. So, for example, we can take a model and we can reduce the number of cloud points. Now, it doesn't reduce any angles, any sharp angles. It only reduces the number of cloud points that are located between objects that are below a certain angle on the object. So, if something was square and it only had 4 cloud points, it wouldn't remove any of the cloud points. But let's say you've got an object that has thousands and thousands of cloud points in areas that we can't even reproduce. You could take the size of that model. So for example, let's look at this. We'll look at what the size is. Let me just clear the bill plate, and I'm going to bring in another object. So we're going to bring in let's see, I need to get to So we're going to bring in this calibration cylinder. Okay, and we're going to look at the size of it. So it says that this one it takes up 11.9 megabytes. And we used a really high quality, high cloud point for calibration. But let's say that it was twice this size. We would go into or we want to reduce the size. The size of it is 11.9, and we want to reduce that to half. We'd go to mesh reduction, and we'd say 50% reduction, start reduction. We come over here, now we would look at the object information, and now it's 5.9. So basically what it does is it reduces the number of cloud points in an object without reducing much of the integrity of the part and the points that you want to see. So that's kind of an interesting and valuable component to this. And on the very bottom row, we have our hollowing features. So that's significant. When you're printing models, you'd like to have uniformity in the size of the model. So let me bring a model onto the build plate. And so we're going to bring model. And we're going to rotate this up. And let's just go ahead and get this to where it's flat on the build plate. And we're going to bring it down. So now we've got it on the build plate, and we'd like to make this hollow. So we go to our editing tools. We can either make it hollow and it is just hollow inside, or we can hollow it to the build plate. So hollowing it to the build plate is the best design for a top-down printer. So we say hollow to build plate.
Notice it's going to cut everything that's below the build plate off.
So you'll now notice that this model has been hollowed, and it's been hollowed to a thickness of 2 millimeters. Now, we also have this feature that allows us to put holes in the model. So I can click this button, and basically what it does is it brings in a cutting tool. So I can take it there, rotate this. Now what we've got is we've got an object that allows me to cut a hole in the side of this model. So now you hit the control button, and you come back over here and hit this button, cut hole. And if you look at the model now has a hole in it, a drain hole, to let the resin drain out if you were needing to do a solid model with a hole through it. So that explains to you the editing tools. Now we want to look at the viewing tools. And so under viewing, whenever we are laying things out on the build plate, we have the ability to make objects transparent so we can see inside them. And we adjust this transparency here, so we can make this to where it has no transparency, or we can really make it to where it's just barely visible to be able to see that object. We also have the ability to make it solid, and this last one gives us the ability to see the mesh. We're going to make it transparent so that we can actually see the mesh. So now what we're looking at is actually just the mesh work of the model. Okay, so that concludes the manipulation features of the objects on the build plate. We also have some information here that I think is important. This tells you which version of the software you're on, and then there's also always a technical support number here that you can call in on. So all of these features that you see in the software here, we update the software frequently, and we put added features to the software that make it either faster, more robust, and different things. The next thing we want to go over is the support features on the build plate. Now I'd like to demonstrate to you the support feature of the JUELL 3D software. The support icon is located below the 3D layout. First, let's bring a model onto the build plate. And this first model would normally be built in a position laying it flat on the build plate. But let's assume for a second that we have something that has a different shape. Maybe it's a surgical guide, maybe it's a dental crown, or some other object that you need or have downward facing areas of the model. Also, I'd like to put an extra model on here. So let me put another model, and we're going to move these. So now we have two models. Let me move this model up a little bit. And we'll take this one up a little bit also. And we're going to have these with different angles. Okay, so now we want to look at putting supports underneath these models. So under the supports, we have the advanced configuration. With advanced configuration, you have the critical angle, and that's the angle in which the model has a portion of it facing down. It's currently set at 60 degrees. The point density is the distance between each point that connects to the model. They're currently set at a distance of 1.8. The point rigid density is now set at 25. That's the distance between the supports. The point size is 0.1, and that's actually in 0.1 is actually in millimeters. So that would be 100 microns is the size. The scaffolding offset is the distance from the model to the scaffolding, 2.6. The scaffolding angle is 15. So all of these features can be adjusted so that you can build your supports relative to the size of the object that you're printing. This is the size of holes if you want to add holes to the bed. This is the thickness of the bed. You can either turn the bed on or turn it off. And then you save it as a preset. And we could call this preset, let's call this surgical guides. Okay, we would save that. And let's close this. And now under our, I would need to, once I create a new one, I have to go in and close the software and reopen it. But this one is the dental, and so it's creating supports for the dental. And it's only going to create them for this one model. So here are all the supports in place. We also could have, let me delete the supports, remove them. We also could have said, well, we want supports under all the models on the build plate. So we click this. So now we have supports under both models. And that's basically the supports. Let me remove the supports, and we're going to go in and I'm going to just pick certain areas to put a support in. So turn this off, and this allows me just to go in and put a support wherever I want to. You just double click on the model and it creates a support one at a time. You can also highlight a support. Let me turn the supports off, and I'm going to highlight this support, for example. Double click on it, and I can come over here to the scene and I can remove that support. So the supports are easy. This shows you the shape of supports, and this is for these single supports. You do that here. Within the supports, we have what we call a bed of nails, and a bed of nails just puts a support a certain distance. It doesn't look at the lowest hanging portion. It just puts a support anywhere that it needs a support on a certain spacing. So I'm going to go ahead and hit auto generate, and it's going to create supports. And what it did was just create supports automatically based on a certain spacing that we've defined down here, 1 every 5 millimeters in the X and Y. And then we have adaptive supports. Adaptive is the best one to use is the JUELL support. Adaptive just uses a different algorithm to create the supports, but it doesn't have scaffolding with it. So my recommendation is that you use the JUELL support, and you define in your JUELL supports, you define these and create different types of surgical guides, different supports for dentures, different supports that you might use throughout the process of creating supports. So that covers creation of supports. We will offer a more detailed video on creation of supports, but supports are critical when creating models and trying to build models where they can't have a large flat area that rests on the build plate.